Welcome to Sliders and Wings, the podcast about the TV show Sliders and the TV show Wings. This is Valerie Temple.
And I'm Rachel Cox.
Not really, but Rachel Cox is in absentia today.
Rachel was hit by a car.
No!
So I'm Rachel now.
No, that's sad. Have you been transplanted into a Robo Rachel?
Yes. Her sentience is now in my form, much like the subject of today's episode.
Joining me in Rachel's place, even though she is irreplaceable, is artist and my husband, Aaron Lange.
Hello.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining me on my podcast.
Well, it's not like I had a choice.
No, I strong-armed you. Sorry about it. But we did pick a show that you would be interested in talking about, correct?
Well, I guess we'll get to the meat of that, won't we?
So we're talking today about RoboCop, the TV show, specifically the 1984 Canadian television show. Ran for 22 episodes, but it was not renewed for a second season. Did you ever watch this show when it was on the air?
No, never. I remember it existing, but I could be conflating that with the series of TV movies from 2001, I think it was. Like a miniseries package, then maybe 4. But also the 94 series may have got picked up and was airing later in the 90s. It's all kind of a blur of shitty RoboCop.
Right. You're a RoboCop fan, though, in general, correct?
Yeah, the Paul Verhoeven movie, big fan of that.
A classic. I don't remember this show at all. You suggested it. I was like, oh, a RoboCop TV show.
I don't even know why it crossed my mind.
It was a Canadian show, so it probably was picked up and aired in syndicated weird time slots. I couldn't tell you when this aired.
Very different than like Hercules or Xena, but it's of the same genus. I don't know. Very cheap genre shows that aired on cable. I don't think RoboCop was syndicated, but I don't really know what syndicated means.
I still don't know, and I really should at this point.
I have a sense of what it means. It's made privately, and it's like, hey, you can show this if you want.
It's not like a network show and it's owned by the network. It's sort of like a freelance kind of situation where it's made privately and then sold to different markets.
So maybe RoboCop is like a gray area where it was actually made by a studio in Canada, but was then syndicated to markets outside of Canada.
That seems to be what happened. It doesn't seem like the fact that no one knew where to watch it or when was really the reason why the show failed. I mean, that was just one of a myriad of reasons the show failed. The movies are incredibly violent.
Well, first two.
The first two are incredibly violent, but kids love RoboCop. So it was one of those things where in subsequent...
Well, they made a kids cartoon in the 80s, which is very strange. So let's start at the beginning here.
Yes.
RoboCop came out in, what, 1987?
Something like that, yeah.
88? And it was so violent, it was originally given an X rating. And that version, that X-rated cut, is actually what the Criterion release of RoboCop is. Ironically, Paul Verhoeven said that the R-rated version was more disturbing because the X-rated version, the violence is so prolonged, it almost crosses a threshold into almost like a Monty Python.
Blood spurting everywhere.
Exaggerated and cartoonish. Verhoeven said he kind of had the last laugh.
That makes sense because the tone of RoboCop is, I mean, it's a satire, really. And it's just this very dark, searing deconstruction of the time period, basically.
Right. So we have this movie that's given an X rating, and then a year later, there's a children's cartoon show, which I'm assuming ran on Saturday mornings. I don't remember it. RoboCop was a success financially. So the money people get involved, and they're like, well, let's make this for a larger audience or a children's audience. And then you get a real conflict of interests.
RoboCop, just his design, I understand why it appeals to kids. He looks cool.
He's a robot and he's a cop.
He's a robot and he's a cop. It's really easy to understand.
I knew who he was before I'd ever seen the movie.
Yeah, he's an action figure.
Literally as well. Yeah, so there were these figures in our childhood of like movies maybe we weren't seeing because we were too young, but they loomed large in our psyches, like RoboCop,
The Terminator,
Freddy Krueger, Everyone knew who they were, even if your parents wouldn't let you watch these movies. You go to the video store and there were posters. I remember there was a cardboard cutout, life-size, promoting RoboCop 3 at my local video store.
Right. And you're like, this looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good point. Freddy Krueger was very popular in my elementary school. Everyone loved Freddy Krueger. I don't know how many of my classmates were actually allowed to watch Nightmare on Elm Street.
I never saw them until I was older. I didn't have like an older sibling to show them to me. So then what we have RoboCop 2, which is from 1990 to my surprise. You associate RoboCop with the 80s. Most of what happened was in the 90s. So RoboCop 2, I have seen. It's been a long time, so I don't have much to say about that one. Everyone views it as inferior, but it's still kind of the same tone and aesthetic.
Right.
Still violent, it's still rated R. And then, here we go. The money people say we can make more money if this is a PG-13. And so enter RoboCop 3, which Valerie and I both did watch as research for this episode.
That's right. We did a lot of research for this episode. Get ready for it, everybody. RoboCop, the TV series, and RoboCop 3 were being made around the same time. Is that right? I'm pretty sure that RoboCop, the TV show, was about to air for the first time when RoboCop 3 debuted.
When did RoboCop 3 come out?
93. So this Canadian series came out in 1994. I think this was in production. The TV show was in production as RoboCop 3 was about to come out. And then RoboCop 3 flopped hard. Oh, we're going to draft off of this new movie. There's going to be a renewed interest for RoboCop. People are going to really like it.
Didn't happen. 3 is the number that seems to happen. Like 3 is when like the Hellraiser series gets defanged.
Isn't 3 the Dream Warriors?
Nightmare on Elm Street, yeah, which is more kid friendly. It's not quite the same thing, but you have a big shift with the Halloween series with 3. 3 is when Jason Voorhees gets his mask in the Friday the 13th movies.
Whoa.
3 is when shifts happen. In the case of Friday the 13th, a very successful shift. In these other films,
not so much.
So yeah, you take out the violence of RoboCop, you're left with RoboCop's a very silly idea.
Yes.
That silly idea juxtaposed with this extreme violence and this, I don't want to say fascist because it's not a state power, it's a corporate power in this Detroit of the future. OCP, you got this dystopian light cyberpunk premise. And then you start seeing the edges off and it just gets very silly.
Really, really fast. And the best part of RoboCop 3, I think, highlights how silly the idea is. Like there's this guy in the police station who's hassling one of the police officers. You just hear him off screen. He's like, you got a RoboCop? What do you got, a ghost cop? Vampire cop?
It's the best part of the movie.
If you think about it, you're like, yeah, RoboCop is a silly... It's
Ninja Cop, Santa Cop, whatever.
How many other kinds of cops can you have?
It's a Mad Lib. Let's just be crystal clear. RoboCop 3 is not good, but I kind of enjoyed it for what it is, knowing that it's like an inferior, idiotic 90s watered down sequel. On those terms, I thought it was pretty good.
It was fine. It was a little messy. Main characters die in weird spots.
Yeah, that's odd. Frank Miller, the comic book writer, wrote the screenplay as he did the screenplay for RoboCop 2. And as I understand, his original screenplays were mucked with quite a bit. So Frank Miller does carry on the satirical elements from the original RoboCop with these various TV bits. Frank Miller famously did a lot of similar satire in his graphic novel Dark Knight Returns. So he was already accustomed to these kind of media criticisms.
And the TV series was based on an unused script for RoboCop 2 called Corporate Wars.
That was the original screenwriters, too, for the first film.
It's the original screenwriters from the first film, yes.
That bodes well. You think, hey, maybe this TV show pilot, which is movie length, this is taken from an unused script for the second movie. Maybe this is something good. It's the original writers. The answer is no.
The answer is a big no. It's pretty silly. Just RoboCop itself is a silly idea, and then like they just added sillier and sillier things.
And silly would be fine if it wasn't boring. So we only watched the pilot. I have a feeling that the regular episodes are easier to digest and a little more fun.
This first episode is called The Future of Law Enforcement, which is weird because I think it takes place 4 to 5 years after the original RoboCop and ignores the 2 sequels. A jumping off point is the original movie, and then that's it. Wasn't the future of law enforcement 4 to 5 years ago when RoboCop was introduced? I mean, I guess that's semantics, but...
So let's talk about this. So for rights reasons, they couldn't use the names of any of the original characters except for RoboCop. How much more would that have cost?
I know!
Like, you can have RoboCop, but you can't have the name of one of the real cops.
Yeah, Nancy Allen's character.
Or just these aren't like action figure ready. We're not talking about Boba Fett here. So what was the fine print on that deal? I'd like to know.
I would love to know because it just makes no sense.
It gets worse. So they couldn't have these names, but many of the characters are the previous characters, but only kind of. They seem very similar.
It's designer imposters. It's kind of like, but not exactly.
Which is just confusing.
He's got a female cop partner.
Nancy Allen is the partner in the films, and she's very good and kind of iconic. Then there's another female cop character on the show, which, like, is this her or isn't it?
Her name's Lisa Madigan in the TV show.
And we both like the actress.
Yeah, we both liked her.
The character wasn't necessarily well written, but she had a certain something.
She had a little zing.
She had a kind of that hard to describe, like that ineffable kind of 90s.
I could imagine her on 1 to 2 seasons of NYPD Blue.
I'm thinking more Red Shoe Diaries, but...
No, I'm thinking one of those characters that was introduced on NYPD Blue that didn't catch on. There were a couple of brunettes that they cycled through.
She was good. We should look up her IMDb.
I did look it up and there's not really much there. Surprisingly, though, Diana Powers, aka the Neurobrain, the ghost.
Oh, okay. There's this character, and this is how fucking boring this show is. She is killed, and I missed it. When did this happen? And then we thought she was a ghost.
But she's not the ghost.
She's a hologram.
So basically, it's kind of like a Batman Returns Selena Kyle type of situation where this mousy secretary is murdered, then gets a new life. Selena Kyle becomes Catwoman and is a total badass. This lady, she's murdered so that this crazy doctor, whose name is Cray Z, Mallardo.
That's correct.
Amazing. Hats off to those writers. He murders her so he can take her brain and use it to power something called the Neurobrain, which is his computer cyberpunk network that is supposed to run the whole city. So everything in Delta City is supposed to be automated and run by this
just this description is making me bored. Like it's like such a complicated, it's a difficult to follow story.
Yeah, basically there's OCP, this huge corporate entity. They're bad. They're up to no good always. And they have this scientist in their employ who is developing this system, and he's a crazy person. Not only is the corporation bad, but he's making it even worse. Involved in that is a bunch of murders of homeless people because there's a lot of brains that are being needed for whatever science he's doing.
Yeah, so then this woman becomes a sentient hologram. She's essentially like Max Headroom, but without the quips.
Yes.
And this is a recurring cast member. This lady hologram, Max Headroom, is part of the show.
Which blew me away. I could not believe.
It's a cool idea. And honestly,
yes.
Well, I mean, all things considered. And I think I got the impression, I mean, we only watched the pilot, but I feel like this world they have here and the stories they end up developing, I get the sense that they're actually very similar to Max Headroom plots.
Oh, okay.
Where you're dealing with this kind of effects of technology, information technology in this kind of crumbling dystopian urban environment, which is a fairly fresh idea in the 1980s. But then when you're getting into 90s cyberpunk, everything's already getting watered down.
And it's also just when there's not the ultra violence to distract you from how silly RoboCop looks, you're like, oh, really? My protagonist is this robot cop? No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. He's a guy that only works when he's blowing people away. The action is cool enough that you can get around the fact that he is lumbering around. His body is shaped really weird.
What do you think? What do you think of the overall design of RoboCop? And I don't mean the quality in the TV show, but I mean just in general.
I mean, it's iconic. I think that the head portion is the most successful. It's cool. He's got that visor, the helmet. It's cool. I think the body portion of it is where it falls apart for me. It looks really silly.
Valerie thinks he looks fat.
Yes, he looks plus size to me.
That's what you said.
And he's just like walking real slow, and they show a lot of his feet. His feet are silly looking to me. I don't know.
I think he's a cool looking character. I think he's iconic, and yet there's just something about it that never quite sat right with me.
It's limited. The 90s already had Data on Star Trek, The Next Generation. He's a robot, you know.
When did Terminator 2 come out?
91.
Yeah, so Terminator 2 kind of, RoboCop doesn't have a chance anymore.
No.
Here comes Terminator, which is of the 90s.
Absolutely. And the fact that in Terminator 2, the Terminator is now a good guy and is essentially a future cop.
I think James Cameron is a real asshole, and he's not someone I'd like to be in an elevator with. But credit where it's due, and James Cameron is deserving of a lot of credit for a lot of things in his career. He didn't just make your typical cash grab sequel where it's more the same but not as good. Terminator 2 is its own thing. It's an update. It's ready for the 90s, but while also still being connected to the original. It's not some retcon. I mean, he just smoked everything. He set the standard. That movie holds up.
Absolutely holds up. The RoboCop franchise, it opened strong and just kept degrading, and the more watered down it gets, the sillier it gets, the more kids that are involved. RoboCop 3, there's a Newt character, Newt from Aliens, a little kid who becomes friends with RoboCop. RoboCop is holding this kid's hand. It's silly.
And the 90s were a very apolitical decade. Everyone just kind of wanted to pretend things weren't happening. I guess gang violence was in the media.
The Splatter Punks, you mean?
Splatter Punks, that's the gang in RoboCop 3. The 90s were not about this type of like social satire, talking about what's going on in the inner city. RoboCop's like the entire franchise is obsessed with corporate development, gentrification. And in RoboCop 3, this is great, the cops team up with RoboCop to be against the private corporation that's kicking people out of their homes. Because, you know, throughout history, the police have always sided with tenant rights. They're never the foot soldiers of this oppression.
That's what was so crazy to me about that. And also the TV show as well, is that there seems to be shades of cops. There's these bad cops that are foot soldiers of the corporation. They're in the corporation's pocket. But then there's good cops who follow the prime directives. And then there's
the city.
They work for the city.
So we have old Detroit, and then there's something called Delta City.
Delta City is the city of the future that I think OCP is developing, or I don't know how those two coincide. Are they the same? Or are they?
Or it was like Delta City downtown.
Right.
It's like the most gentrified urban center.
Who knows?
And then they have their own private police. And then there's the old school police. RoboCop is kind of situated
in between
these interests of like legitimate law enforcement and private corporate interests, which, you know, there's a lot to explore there. And to varying degrees, the film series does.
But the show, I'm not sure what they were trying to do.
They don't seem to want to talk about it. They're just like saddled with this premise. Say what you about Max Headroom. It was not a great show, but the showrunners, the creators, the writers, they were invested in the premise. They were there to talk about the media. They were there to talk about these social issues. That was their number one agenda. Well, with RoboCop, it really seems incidental.
They were like, okay, we're taking from the movie, so we're trying to copy it, but we're also not really understanding what the original movie was trying to say and not really interested in that at all. We're just using those elements because those exist in the first movie. It was a Google Translate version.
They would have been better off just taking it in a completely different direction.
Correct.
And making it really for kids, as opposed to this type of compromise where he actually maybe fights other robots or ninjas or something more colorful. But, you know, they half-ass it, and there's a reason why.
It's a forgotten show. Although it does seem like in subsequent episodes, there is a very colorful looking villain dressed as, what is it, Commander Cash?
Oh, from one of the cartoons. So starting in the third movie, in the various TV bits, they started having animated sequences, like animated commercials, which are of that style of the time, which is
kind of the Ren and Stimpy kind of style.
It's got aspects of 1950s design, but it's updated in a good way. And I guess it was the Nelvana who did this, which is a Canadian animation studio. And so they continue that into the TV series. It's kind of jarring.
The TV show also included those little interstitials of media break and news stories, commercials coming in, breaking up the story.
So clearly, like, the bosses have handed in this script and there's this reporter's doing a story. It's clearly a frame job to make RoboCop look bad. And the newscaster is like, I can't even do this, and walks off. Because once again, like the police, the mainstream media are always there to defend tenants' rights, labor issues. Boy, there's a problem with your landlord or your boss. Well, who's going to help? The media and the police, of course.
Yeah.
They've always been there for American citizens.
Right. Yeah. Our heroes are the media and cops.
Franchise that began so cynically. Maybe it's important to remember that the original RoboCop is directed by a European. So I think whatever satirical elements were already in the script, they were there. They were intentional. Verhoeven was just able to perversely accentuate because, as this European,
he's coming at it from a different perspective.
This out of control machine that America is, and especially Reagan's America. So this idiotic robot cop is such a blunt symbol of American imperialism, 1980s techno-fascism.
He absolutely is letting America have it. And we ate it up. Everyone was like, we love RoboCop. Paul Verhoeven is probably chuckling to himself, they don't realize that I'm making fun of them.
It's set in Detroit, which is falling apart, but it's also the home of the auto industry. So we have this chrome, shiny robot, this kind of phallic thing.
Shooting bullets. Shooting.
Coming out of Detroit. So it's just so loaded with a statement. And then there's resurrection themes. Verhoeven, he puts his hand on the scale.
To see this weird copy of a copy of a copy version of it that is just totally devoid of any of those things that make it interesting.
There's the video games they made, the comic books. It's so strange because the original RoboCop is just so viciously opposed to all this type of crass commercialism and just anything American. And then it's just nobody cares. Marching forward, here's your Game Boy RoboCop.
RoboCop versus the Terminator.
Which that Game Boy RoboCop game has an awesome score. The music is incredible.
I'm glad you brought up the score, Aaron, because there's an incredible...
I set you up for a segue?
That's right. Joe Walsh, featuring Lita Ford, did the closing credits song for RoboCop, the TV show. The song is called A Future to This Life.
Joe fucking Walsh from the motherfucking James Gang and the Eagles. We can forget about the Eagles. Crazy ass Joe Walsh. When 60s icons were kind of struggling when MTV started, when punk and new wave was happening and you get some really weird Neil Young albums, or oh, what's Pete Townsend doing with that skinny tie? This is that, but in the 90s. And Joe Walsh, I gotta say, so, all right, they made a music video. It never aired. And on YouTube, there's fragments of it. It's stitched together. It's not a whole music video, but Joe Walsh, dude, he's an alien bounty hunter. He's got these awesome sunglasses. His hair looks bleached. Is he wearing a trench coat?
He's wearing a trench coat, white button-down shirt, tie. It's a little disheveled.
He's not sober yet.
No, he looks bad.
Dude, I bet you $1 million, Joe Walsh, if you were to ask him, dude, what was up with the RoboCop song? He would have no idea what you're talking about.
I would not take that bet because I would lose that bet because I'm sure
he doesn't even know who RoboCop is, dude.
Right.
Joe Walsh doesn't remember the 80s. That guy was out of his mind.
How would you be able to forget filming that video? Because it's a surreal bit of imagery.
And what was Lita Ford doing in the 90s? I know she was in the Runaways and she got metal chick in the 80s. 93, when did Nirvana hit? Was metal still going on, the hair metal?
Kind of. It was
way out. Whatever was going on in 1994, Lita Ford and Joe Walsh were not it.
No.
And then with RoboCop, it's this zeitgeist is past.
Just them being selected to do the RoboCop song shows how far they've missed the mark. It's too late for all of this.
And this is around the time that Billy Idol did his last solo album, and it was called Cyberpunk.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. Cyberpunk as a literary genre Cyberpunk remains relevant. The work that was done, especially in the 80s, holds up. Ironically, the best thing that the mainstream media, that Hollywood or whatever did, was Blade Runner, which was actually ahead of its time. The most famous cyberpunk book, Neuromancer, hadn't even come out yet. So Blade Runner, just through dumb luck, got it right. And then Hollywood never really got it again. Now, RoboCop, the first one, is a good movie. You have to like argue that it's cyberpunk. You have to be like, it's cyberpunk because this and because this, because this. It's not like people tend to think in that Blade Runner way.
Would Terminator 2 count?
You have to like make the argument.
Because there's like Skynet and Cyberdyne and...
Yeah, it's there. So, I mean, RoboCop in particular does have the major cyberpunk theme of government is the joke. The puppets, it's a show. It's irrelevant. The real power and control is private corporations, which RoboCop hits hard. And so does the Alien franchise. But it's called the Corporation.
It was a bad call, Ripley.
Bad call.
Paul Reiser is the bad guy of Aliens, is guy who works for the company.
Stooge.
The company stooge who is just like, yeah, this is good for the company. People are expendable. The corporation is...
We want to make a bioweapon.
We want to make a profit is what they want to make.
Through a bioweapon. The second Alien movie is really actually pretty cyberpunk when you think about it.
After this podcast, you're just gonna be like, wow, James Cameron, man. Yeah, he's the best.
Oh, he isn't though. I think Aliens is his best movie, without a doubt. And I think it might be the best Aliens movie. It's very rich. I
feel like Alien and Aliens are equal in my mind.
Those are absolutely, if you're having a contest to be the best, those are the contenders. 3 is still good.
And they're kind of like two different things. One is like a straight up horror movie.
They're all different. They all have their own vibe. What's great about Alien is it is like this death march for Ripley. She goes into hypersleep or whatever, and then she like wakes up, boom, 75 years later, her family's dead. She's going back to this planet to fight aliens again. Hypersleep again. Newt's dead.
Immediately.
She's in prison. Hypersleep again. Now she's cloned for an alien resurrection. How much time has passed? Like over 100 years. But for her, it's like a really condensed period of time. And it's just this gauntlet.
They really torture Ripley. What did that character do to deserve what has happened to that character? Nothing good happens to Ripley. If you really write it all out, bullet point by bullet point, and the fact that for her, it is condensed into like this is basically a 1 month period of time for her. It's horrific. That's like 100 noms all together, all on top of each other. It's relentless.
So I guess bottom line, Aliens, much better series than RoboCop.
Yeah, that's true.
Did they ever do a Alien RoboCop crossover comic book? I bet you they did. I'm sure Dark Horse by law.
I did not see that on the Wikipedia page, but that doesn't mean it's not so.
Alien, Terminator, RoboCop. They were constantly just like shuffling those franchises around.
Alien versus Predator versus RoboCop.
I think it did get to the point where they were doing 3 at a time.
No way. Real battle royale.
See the Alien Superman crossover?
No.
I never read it, but it had a pretty iconic advertising campaign where it was the chest burster coming through the Superman.
The S.
Yeah, with that.
Pretty cool. That's a cool image. Okay, so what would you say the most 90s thing is of this show?
Oh, well, Dr. Cray Z's, I don't know what that tech, it's not denim, but it's this denim-like teal dress shirt.
And he also had like a 90s tie with it too that was maroon pattern.
Right, and then like the slacks and jacket, but it's not a suit, khakis, and then another jacket. What are those shirts made of? They don't have like a crisp, clean dress shirt quality. They're like these Seinfeld shirts.
They're kind of a thicker material.
And like the color's not even. It's got like a slight mottled quality.
Yeah, it looks a little dusty.
It's got like a denimness about it, but it's not. Oh, they're the worst.
I have things to tell you about that actor, by the way. Cliff DeYoung, who played Dr. Cray Z Mallardo. Before he became an actor, he was in a band, a psychedelic rock band in the 60s called Clear Light.
That's so Christian.
I guess Clear Light was the name of a kind of LSD.
Okay, of course it was.
He also had a song called My Sweet Lady from 1974. And I'd like to play this song for you because it's the most 1974 song I've ever heard. So it was from the soundtrack of a television movie he made called Sunshine, and it reached number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 pop charts in early 1974.
It was the hot.
Yeah, the Billboard.
I wanted to be sure it wasn't the cold 100.
Oh my God. Well, you'll be the judge. All right, get ready for this.
Are you crying? Do the tears belong to me? Do you think our time together is all gone? Lady, you've been dreaming. I'm as close as I can be, and I swear to you our time has just begun. Oh, my lady.
Beautiful, right?
It's like worse than bad. So Valerie made me listen to this whole song. I hope she edits this down.
Oh, I will edit it down.
I had to hear the whole thing. And this, in this little thumbnail window here, she's doing this little like hippie dance.
You gotta sway to this song. You gotta sway.
You know what this music sounds like? It sounds like, I remember the first time I saw The Last House on the Left. Everyone's like, dude, this movie's, it's so awesome. And then it's got all this Gordon Lightfoot folk singer-songwriter music. And it's just, and that's what this My Sweet Lady sounds like.
I did want to follow it up with the song that his band, before he became an actor, Clear Light, this is the song they're most...
Oh, I used to have that album.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I used to have a real beat-up copy of this. Totally okay.
This song is 6.5 minutes long. I don't think we'll listen to the whole thing, but this is where compare and contrast.
Good morning, Mr. Blue. We've got our eyes on you. The evidence is clear that you've been scheming.
What will it take to whip you into line? A broken heart, a broken head. It can be arranged. It can be arranged.
Yeah, it's totally all right.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I had that album and I listened to it a couple times. I was like, yeah, this isn't bad.
That's more your speed, definitely. It's still not good.
There were just so many bands like that. There's better ones. Some guys are just obsessed with that garage and psych stuff and they need to have everything.
Did that make it onto Nuggets?
That song didn't, but maybe... I bet, I bet somebody from that band is in a band that is on Nuggets.
One of the guys from the band played for the Doors. So, I mean...
Oh, really?
A lot of them kept making music. Look up Clear Light on Wikipedia. It's kind of interesting. They had one album and they broke up. The original name of their band was The Brain Train.
Ooh, that sounds so 70s.
I know,
a little ahead of the curve on that one.
So bad.
And that sounds like some George Clinton, P-Funk side project.
The Brain Train. Whoa. For me, the most 90s thing was the rollerblading Splatter Punk.
Well, the Splatter Punks from the movie or the show?
Maybe they weren't Splatter Punks. They were just punks.
Yeah. Splatter Punks, not to be confused with Cyberpunks.
Pretty different. But there was a rollerblading bad guy near the end.
Yeah, that'll make you, but they'll put you in the running for most 90s,
Rollerblading for sure. Accent Corner. All I have for that is just the actor who played RoboCop is not Peter Weller. He's not the RoboCop you know and love. Richard Eden. How do you think he did portraying a robot?
It's not even a fair question because so much of it has to do with the makeup and special effects and the lighting. So they had another guy play RoboCop in RoboCop 3 and it works. A kid
you don't care. Yeah.
No, it's totally fine. No disrespect to
Peter Weller.
Who does a good job as RoboCop.
RoboCop is sort of like Batman, where you cast for Bruce Wayne, not Batman. In RoboCop, you cast for Alex Murphy.
I guess so. But the guy in RoboCop 3, I think they also like didn't keep the camera on him too long in RoboCop 3 on his like actual face. They did a good job. The series, he looks like Anakin Skywalker, old Anakin Skywalker, like the end of like Return of the Jedi.
When he takes his mask off and he looks so gross.
He like drew like a face on like a hard-boiled egg. Not the shell, but like a peeled hard-boiled egg.
He looks like a garbage pail kid.
Right. Well, with that, what are our Mad Magazine titles?
That is a good segue. I have two good ones.
I bet they're the same as mine.
Robo Flop.
That was my, yep.
And then Robo, comma, stop.
Oh, boy. I had... They would never do that.
They would never do that? Never?
No.
Robo, comma, stop.
No. I had Robo Flop and Robo Slob.
Robo Slob?
Remember like those square voice balloons? And they're always like, hey, Mort Drucker did some drawing. And it's like, hi, I'm Robo Slob. You know, they introduce themselves.
Yeah, I remember that.
Hi, I'm Robo Slob.
Hi, I'm Robo Slob.
This city is a pigsty.
What do you expect from Detroit?
Yeah, they would definitely squeeze in some like Detroit joke.
It's surprising that, I mean, I guess it makes sense that it's Detroit because of the auto industry, but Cleveland, it's painted very poorly in movies and TV. It's the go-to slum.
Yeah.
It's the go-to like joke of a city.
We don't even get the cool science fiction dystopian shithole like RoboCop.
You're just a shithole with a burning river.
Cleveland doesn't even merit this type of gussying up with fascist robot army.
We could never get that together in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's true.
Cleveland is not the place where they're developing new technology.
OCP would not set up shop.
They would not be based here.
Cleveland's leadership is so stupid, they can't even be corrupt. They can't even get that right.
There wouldn't be this evil organization that's masterminding all of these crimes. It just would not happen.
OCP would be like, psst, you need to give us a tax break and we'll set up business here. And Cleveland's like, have you heard about our world-class orchestra? How about our park system and our beautiful lake? The lake never caught on fire.
The evil guys are like, we're trying to get something together with you, something evil and lucrative.
And Cleveland's like, yeah, have you heard about the excellent places to eat in Tremont?
Have you been to the metro parks?
Have you been to Ohio City's gastropubs?
OCP's like, forget this. We're going to Detroit. At least in Detroit, they can figure it out. They understand what we're saying. They can pick up what we're laying down.
That's right.
What you watching, Aaron?
As we've maybe in the introduction is be clear, is my wife. She knows what I'm watching. Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
We've been watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine for a while now.
Yeah, we're still like, it feels like we've been about to enter season 4 for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, season 3's still going.
We're in a reverse wormhole.
Why is it reverse?
Because wormhole gets you there really fast.
Oh, okay, I understand.
We're somehow in stasis. We watched a really goofy one last night. It was just a lot of actory stuff.
It sure was.
Oh boy. Jadzia Dax is doing some sort of ritual where she gets to meet all of her previous hosts. And in order to do that, she has to enlist the cast of Deep Space Nine to turn their bodies over to the memories of the hosts or something.
Yeah, nothing will make you realize how dumb Star Trek is until you have to like explain. There's no quick like setup.
No.
So Jadzia Dax is a trill. She has spots on her face and a symbiote that lives in her tum-tum. And there's this ritual question. Does the symbiote die? What's the symbiote lifespan?
I don't know. That's a good question. What does an old symbiote look like?
Well, the young ones don't look too good, as I remember.
They look gross. They look like a brain. So basically, the cast of Deep Space Nine got to play characters of Jadzia's hosts. And
Nana Visitor really went for it.
Nana Visitor, my favorite. Is that all you're watching? You're just watching White House videos.
White House, as in the Power Electronics band? The answer is yes. Thank you for asking about White House. I'd be thrilled to. Oh, all right. I got one to connect. connect for you. I discovered an early power electronics band recently called Hunting Lodge. And they are from fucking Michigan in the early 80s. And these guys were doing crazy throbbing gristle shit in some town in Michigan I've never heard of. These guys are pretty cool.
Do you think Alex Murphy listened to them?
I'd like to think so.
Because we know what RoboCop listened to. RoboCop listened to Joe Walsh.
Well, interestingly enough, techno came out of Detroit, which a lot of people don't know. And I don't know much about it. But yeah, there's like a real history of underground techno in Detroit. So I think that's what Murphy listened to.
That would have been more interesting for them to work into the show. Hey, this is Detroit. This is where this is set. This is cyberpunk. Techno, it all kind of like could have melded well together, but I
mean, it was like a legit like underground thing. As it was told to me, there was some radio station in Detroit. I don't know if it was college radio or like a major radio station, and they were like playing Kraftwerk and stuff. So this kind of like really resonated in the local community. I'm really ignorant about it, so I'm sure someone is listening and they're like, Aaron sounds like a moron.
You can research it and I'll tell everyone what you've learned in housekeeping next week.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you'd love to hear you talk about early Detroit techno.
I know I don't, but someone might. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron, for joining me on this very special Rachel Coxless episode of Sliders and
Rachel
Wings.
Coxless.
Rachel Coxless. We got no Cox.
Oh, boy.
What do we do without our Cox? Anyway, we miss you, Rachel. Come back soon. Thank you again, Aaron. And this has been Sliders and Wings. And you can email us at slidersandwings@gmail.com. And that's it. Good night, Aaron.
Bye.
Bye.